Hello, my little wordlings. Having a bit of an FND day, but I still thought we could watch something together. It is called This Best-Selling Novel Was a Total Hoax. Now, the thumbnail doesn't really reveal the book, but I remember A Million Little Pieces being the big controversy years ago that they said it was a true story and it turned out to be fake. So let's see what this one's about. Make it bigger. There we go. Ignore chin number 2 and 3.
So it's April of 1956, and radio host Gene Shepard is on a roll during his overnight show on WOR Radio in New York. The latest source of his ire? People who pretend to know everything. You know, the snobs, the posers who fancy themselves scholarly critics, the day people who blindly follow every manufactured fad, the vain townsfolk who compliment the emperor's new clothes. New York, Shepard bemoans, is nothing but a society of pseudo-intellectuals bound by lists. Nobody cares about a
And what's wrong with that?
show unless it's nominated for a Tony or a movie until it gets an Oscar nod. Nobody buys a book if it's not a New York Times bestseller. But once something gets on a list, suddenly everybody's got an opinion on it. Everybody becomes an expert. So Gene has an idea. Why not play a trick on these
Why does he look exactly like Gene Roddenberry?
know-it-alls and expose them as the frauds they really are? At 2 o'clock in the morning, Shep hatches a plan with his late-night/early morning listeners.
What do you say tomorrow morning, each one of us walk into a bookstore and ask for a book that we know does not exist?
The idea is simple. Make up a pretentious-sounding novel written by a pretentious-sounding author, create a fake demand, and then see how many supposed scholars
Okay, I'm already into this. Trolling at its finest, even before the internet.
of the world suddenly know everything there is to know about it. Over the next few hours, Gene and his loyal listeners invent a fake bestseller by the title of I Libertine, the first volume in a trilogy on 18th century court life, written by one Frederick R. Ewing, a supposed Oxford graduate and former World War II British commander, currently a civil servant of Rhodesia, where he spends his free time in the pursuits of scholarly writing. I Libertine is naturally a very scholarly work set in...
Okay, I keep going over the title and the name, like seeing if there's like a hint or if they just made it up or if they made it out of other letters. I was gonna say pantomime, palindrome, Jesus Christ.
England during the 1700s, chronicling the exploits of Lance Courtenay, by day a respected man about town, by night an uninhibited rake. Gene Shepard tasks his audience with this mission. In the morning, walk into a bookstore and ask for a copy of the book. Then sit back and watch the fireworks.
Now you go in and don't crack a smile. Don't do anything. And you'll walk in and say, I would like to have a copy of I Libertine by Frederick Ewing. And you'll take out a
Forgive the interruption, there is apparently some weird animal outside. Let us continue.
list, and he'll look it up, and he'll see that it is not listed. He will turn to you and say, there's no such book, and leave. The next guy that comes in and asks for this, he'll say, it's on order. And the third one that comes in, he's going to be on his phone calling the distributor. Well, if 422 bookstores call in, he's going to be calling Publishers Weekly. I says, now get out and go. And we'll sit back and see what happens.
Shepard's listeners do as instructed, and before long, the publishing world is in a frenzy. Doubleday gets dozens of calls in the morning for the title. Booksellers all over are stumped by the sudden demand for a book they don't have on any of their lists, and they slam Publishers Weekly with queries on locating the distributor. Before long,
I feel bad sometimes for conspiracy theorists because for small things, small local things, it is kind of easy to screw everybody over and make up a lie that kind of gets out of hand.
Is in such demand that the New York Times Sunday section places the title on its list of newly published works, and the phonies fall for it.
Sure enough, the next day a guy says, he says, for years, this guy in this A Street bookstore with his beard has had me totally buffaloed. He says, I went in there today and I said to this guy, I'd like a copy of I Liberty by Ewing. And he says, he looked up from behind the cash register and said, Ewing. It's about time the public discovered him. and I'm getting these calls from people over. One woman wrote in and she says she was sitting in her bridge party and she just casually mentioned, I've been reading I Liberty. And 3 ladies started to discuss it. They not only had read it, they finished it, and 2 of them didn't like it. And so 2 weeks later, they're coming in from all over the country seeing what's happening.
All over, social scenes are filled with people who have an opinion on the book, almost all of whom are, of course, making up that they've read it just to fit in. And Gene Shepard spends
I just have to say, I'm just so happy right now that this happened. I really am. And I don't think it would work now, though. Like, let's say let's say 4 to 5 people who watch this went out and did this, and did this with my book, but it's a real book. And people are saying, oh, maybe we should have this book come in. But the 4 to 5 people are going to be from 4 and 5 different places in the country or the continent. It's just not going to work. Where I live, it's such a small place that there's only one big box bookstore and one used bookstore. And everything else is just kind of events that I would sell at. It would be cool, though, to try this again. Could it work twice?
the next few weeks of his overnight program, keeping his listeners up to date on just how absurd the hoax is getting.
Student lectured. He says, I'm in this history of English writing course. And he said, I wrote a term paper on F.R. Ewing, eclectic historian. And it was about a 9-page paper with footnotes, quotes from Ewing's earlier BBC broadcasts, references. And the thing, he sent it to me, and it had a big red thing on the front of it. It said, superb research. He got a B+. And the guy says, what? My whole education is probably phony. And I says, wait, let's sit back. I says, don't say anything. Just keep asking. Well, within 4 weeks, there was a piece appeared in the Earl Wilson column. It said, had lunch with Freddie Ewing on his way to India with his wife, Marjorie. Oh, no, I'm not kidding you.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there because we got the gist of it. If you want to see the full video, I'll have it in the description. But it does remind me of a guy I went to college with, and it's funny because I was just telling my kid about this because we were talking about editing Wikipedia. So he wrote a term paper, and he wrote about a word that he made up, and then he tried to add it to Wikipedia. And even this was in like 2005, 2006, when anybody could edit anything, and they still took down his article on his own invented word. So even back then, there was some stuff you couldn't do on Wikipedia. I hope you have an even brain day, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.